I was neck deep in a merger agreement when my wife's message lit
don't
up my
go.
phone.
I think maybe we need to break up.
Please don't go.
5 years of marriage reduced to a throwaway line. The same casual tone she'd use when deciding what to order for dinner. I stared at those words for exactly 30 seconds before I answered. Then I typed back, "I agree. Your stuff will be on your porch in an hour." The 3 dots appeared immediately, disappeared, and reappeared. Her next text arrived as a frantic scramble. "Wait, I was joking. WTF Ethan, call me." But I wasn't
Please
joking,
don't go.
and I wasn't calling.
I'm begging
What she didn't
you.
know was that her joke had flipped a switch I'd been arming for weeks. I closed the merger file and walked to our bedroom. Brooke's clothes hung in perfect color coordination. She'd always been obsessive about appearances. I started removing hangers with methodical, practiced motions. Dresses, blouses, those ridiculously expensive shoes she insisted were investments. I shoved everything into garbage bags with the same care I'd used to organize discovery documents. My phone buzzed incessantly. Brooke calling, texting, calling again. I let it ring. She said she was working late again. I almost believed it until I remembered she'd said the same thing 6 nights running. Either she was inventing nuclear fusion or she was seeing someone else. Given that she barely passed high school chemistry, I placed my bets accordingly. The private investigator I'd hired 3 weeks ago had already confirmed my suspicions. Photos showed Brooke entering the Palmer House Hotel with a man I now knew as Garrett Whitfield. Garrett Whitfield. His name sounded like a country club where certain people still didn't get a pass. CEO of Whitfield Luxury Properties, married to former federal prosecutor Sloan Whitfield, and apparently a collector of other men's wives. I dragged the bags to our front porch just as Brooke's BMW turned into our Lincoln Park driveway. She leapt out as if the car were on fire, her perfectly styled blonde hair whipping around her face. "Ethan, what the hell?" she demanded, staring first at the bags and then at me in the doorway. "I was kidding. You know I was kidding. Was it a joke when you were with your boss last Tuesday, or only when you sent me that text?" Her face cycled through a catalog of expressions. Surprise, denial, anger, fear, like an actress going through beats. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said. I pulled out my phone and showed her the first photo. Brooke and Garrett in what read like an intimate conversation at Gibson's Steakhouse, her hand on his arm, his eyes fixed on her lips. "Daniel Rhee is very thorough," I said, naming my PI. Former Chicago PD detective, now freelance, excellent at documentation. Brooke's mask finally slipped. "You had me followed," she spat. My suspicions had been confirmed. She tried to step past me into the house, but I blocked her path. "This is my house too, Ethan." "Actually, it's not. Check the deed. My name's the only one on the purchase from before we married. Illinois is pretty clear on premarital assets." The color drained from her face. She'd never paid attention to paperwork, always left the boring legal stuff to me. Another mistake in a growing collection. "You can't just kick me out." "I can, and I am. You have 30 days to find alternative arrangements." Illinois law is actually pretty generous about that timeline. My phone rang. Unknown number, but I had a feeling who it would be. "Hello, this is Garrett Whitfield. I think we need to talk." Brooke heard his voice and grabbed for the phone. I stepped back. "Mr. Whitfield, I was wondering when you'd call," I said. "You're making a mistake here, Caldwell. This doesn't have to get ugly." "You're absolutely right. It doesn't have to get ugly," he replied. Then I met Brooke's pleading eyes. "It's going to be absolutely devastating instead." I hung up and walked back into the house, closing the door on Brooke's protests, and on the future she thought she'd keep. Hobbies. The question landed where I'd aimed. Brooke's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. "She doesn't, does she?" I bet Garrett's been very careful about that. Rich wives with powerful fathers tend to have resources when they discover infidelity. "You wouldn't," Brooke blurted, scrambling for leverage. "Why wouldn't I?" "Because it would hurt innocent people. Sloan doesn't deserve this." "Neither did I. But that didn't stop you." She shifted tactics, moving closer and letting her hand brush my arm. "We can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can. We can't do anything. You forfeited way when you decided to explore other options." My phone rang. "Daniel Reed, you need to see something." he said without preamble. Can you meet me in an hour? I'll be there, I said. I hung up and found Brooke watching me with growing panic. Who was that? She demanded. Work. It wasn't technically a lie. This had become my most important project. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. Brooke followed. Where are you going? We're not done talking. Yes, we are. Next time you want to communicate, do it through lawyers. I left her standing in the driveway, clutching coffee and croissants, finally understanding that her perfect little life was about to become very complicated. Daniel had chosen our meeting spot well, a diner in Uptown where corporate lawyers and luxury real estate executives would never venture. He waited in a corner booth looking like every cop I'd ever met. Tired eyes that missed nothing, a coffee-stained shirt, the general air of a man who'd seen too much human weakness to be surprised by anything. Your timing was perfect, he said, sliding a manila envelope across the table. I was about to wrap up surveillance when things got interesting. I opened the envelope and immediately understood why he'd called. The photos showed Garrett Whitfield, but not with Brooke. Taken the previous evening at the Chicago Athletic Association, the images showed Garrett with a redhead who looked barely old enough to drink. Who is she? I asked. Jessica Morrison, 23, junior associate at his company. Started there 6 months ago, Daniel said, sipping coffee. Based on the body language, this isn't their first meeting. I studied the photos. Garrett's hand on her thigh, her leaning in, both of them comfortable with the arrangement. There's more, Daniel continued. I dug into his employment records. In the past 3 years, Whitfield Luxury has hired 12 attractive women under age 25. 7 of them quit within 6 months. The ones who stayed got rapid promotions despite limited experience. The pattern was clear and disgusting. Garrett wasn't just a cheater. He was a predator with a system. Does your wife know about the others? He asked. I doubted it. Brooke thinks she's special, I said, feeling a cold satisfaction. She had no idea she was just the latest in a long line of conquests. Daniel leaned back in the booth. So, what's your play here? Divorce is straightforward with this kind of evidence. Divorce is just the beginning. I pulled out my phone and showed him the research I'd compiled on Garrett's business practices. Look at his company's financials. Revenue spikes that don't match market trends, property sales happening at prices that don't make sense, cash transactions that should trigger federal reporting requirements. Daniel whistled softly. You think he's laundering money? The law had taught me that emotion is the enemy of justice. Anger makes you sloppy. Hurt makes you stupid. Cold calculation makes you dangerous. I'd been suspicious for months before I hired Daniel. Brooke's behavior had shifted in subtle ways a less observant husband might miss. But I made my living noticing what others overlooked, finding the clauses that could sink million-dollar deals, spotting inconsistencies that unraveled carefully constructed lies. The late nights started in March. Big project, she'd said, Whitfield expanding into the Gold Coast market. Her explanation was plausible. Luxury real estate was booming and Brooke was their top marketing director. Then came the new clothes. Expensive pieces that exceeded her salary. The suddenly locked phone. The way she'd shower immediately after coming home as if rinsing away evidence. Daniel provided that evidence in meticulous detail. Hotel receipts charged to Garrett's corporate card. Security footage from the Palmer House lobby showing them entering together at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday when Brooke claimed she was touring properties in Evanston. Phone records with dozens of calls between them, often lasting over an hour, frequently late at night. The photograph that sealed it was taken last Friday. Brooke and Garrett in the back seat of his Bentley, parked in the shadows behind a North Shore warehouse. Even through tinted windows, their activities were unmistakable. Daniel had used a telephoto lens that captured everything in devastating clarity. I studied the photos spread across my dining room table like evidence exhibits, each labeled with date, time, and location. Daniel was thorough. You had to be when your work might end up in court. My phone buzzed with another text from Brooke. Please let me explain. It's not what you think. I almost laughed. It was exactly what I thought. The only surprise was how cliched it all was. Successful woman, older boss, afternoon hotel rooms. If I'd pitched it to Hollywood, they'd have rejected it as too predictable. What was unpredictable was what I planned to do about it. I'd spent the evening researching Garrett Whitfield the way I dove into merger targets. Public records, business filings, property ownership, court documents. The picture that emerged was of a man who believed money made him untouchable. Whitfield luxury properties looked impressive on paper. $500 million in annual revenue, premier listings throughout Chicagoland, ties to the city's wealthiest families. But dig deeper and cracks appeared. Employee turnover was unusually high, especially among attractive female staff. 2 workplace complaints had been resolved behind closed doors, never reaching a courtroom. His personal life showed a similar pattern. Married to Sloan Whitfield, daughter of federal appellate Judge Harrison Blackwood, but with a history of affairs carefully managed by expensive crisis PR firms. Garrett thought his money and connections made him immune to consequences. He was about to learn otherwise. But first, I needed to handle Brooke's inevitable counterattack. She arrived the next morning with coffee and croissants from our favorite bakery, the kind of peace offering that smoothed smaller fights. She dressed carefully. The blue dress I'd once said made her eyes look incredible. Subtle makeup that read vulnerability rather than calculation. "Can we at least talk?" she asked, setting the coffee on my kitchen counter. 5 years of marriage deserves a conversation. I accepted the coffee but remained standing. "Go ahead. Talk. This thing with Garrett, it just happened. It doesn't mean anything." "Which thing are we talking about? The time in his office, the time in his car, or the 3 hours you spent at the Palmer House last Tuesday?" Brooke's perfect composure cracked. "You really did have me followed. I had facts verified. There's a difference." She tried tears next. "I love you, Ethan. This was just, I don't know, a mistake. A stupid mistake. A mistake is forgetting the dry cleaning. This was a choice. Multiple choices over multiple months." I set the coffee down and pulled out my phone, scrolling to the photo Daniel took on Friday night. Brooke's face went white when she saw it. "Does Sloan Whitfield know about your boyfriends? I think he's doing something that won't hold up under scrutiny. And I think his wife might be very interested in protecting her family's reputation." Sloan Whitfield, née Blackwood, was a federal prosecutor for 8 years before moving to private practice. Her father is Judge Harrison Blackwood of the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals. Exactly. A woman like that doesn't just get divorced, she gets revenge, especially when her husband's activities could embarrass her family. I gathered the photos and stood to leave. "Send me everything you have on Garrett's business practices. Financial records, employment files, anything you can find," Daniel said. "What about surveillance on your wife?" I told him it was no longer necessary. I had what I needed. Daniel nodded and shook my hand. "Good hunting." Driving back to Lincoln Park, I felt the familiar rush you get when a complex case finally snaps into place. The pieces were falling into place. But unlike the corporate mergers I usually handled, this wasn't about finding common ground. It was about total destruction. I parked in front of the Whitfield's Gold Coast mansion, a limestone monument to old money and older power. Through the windows I could see warm light and what looked like a dinner party in progress. Sloan Whitfield's world, elegant and ordered, was built on the assumption her husband was worthy of the family's status. I walked up the stone steps and rang the bell. A housekeeper answered, looking uncertain when she saw my casual clothes among the formal evening wear visible inside. "I'm sorry, sir, but there's a private dinner," she said. "Ethan Caldwell," I replied, handing her my business card. "I need to speak with Mrs. Whitfield about her husband." "It's urgent." The housekeeper disappeared and moments later Sloan Whitfield appeared in the doorway. She was exactly what I'd expected from her photographs. Mid-30s, a sharp intelligence in her eyes, the bone-deep confidence that comes from growing up in powerful circles. She wore a black cocktail dress that probably cost more than most people's rent. But her expression was all business. "Mr. Caldwell, I'm afraid I don't understand. Your husband is having an affair with my wife, among others. I have proof, and I think you should see it before this becomes public." Her composure was impressive. No flicker of emotion crossed her face, but I saw her grip tighten on the door frame. "I see. Perhaps we should discuss this privately." She led me to a study lined with legal texts and family photographs. Garrett conspicuously absent from most of them. She closed the door and turned to face me, and I saw the prosecutor she'd once been. "Show me," she said. I handed her the envelope containing photos of Garrett with Brooke and with Jessica Morrison. She examined each image with clinical detachment, but her knuckles went white around the paper. "How long?" she asked finally. My wife, at least 3 months. The others, Daniel Reed, can provide a full timeline, but it goes back years. She set the photos on her desk with careful precision. What do you want? She demanded. Justice for both of us, I answered. And what does justice look like to you, Mr. Caldwell? She shot back. I leaned forward. Your husband thinks his money makes him untouchable. He's wrong. You have resources he's forgotten, legal connections, family influence, financial assets he can't access without your consent. Together, we can make sure he faces consequences. Sloane was quiet for a long moment, studying the photos again. When she looked up, her eyes were cold as winter lake water. I'll need to think about this, she said. Of course. But while you're thinking, you should know that Garrett threatened me yesterday, said he had connections and implied he could destroy my career. Men like your husband only understand power. Mrs. Whitfield, the question is whether you're willing to use yours. I left my card on her desk next to the photos. My number if she decided she wanted a longer conversation. Walking back to my car, I felt the first real satisfaction I'd experienced since reading Brooks' text. The game was no longer just about ending my marriage. It was about systematically destroying a man who thought he could take whatever he wanted without consequences. Garrett Whitfield was about to learn how wrong he was. Sloane called the next morning at exactly 8 a.m. No pleasantries, no small talk. Meet me at Millennium Park in 1 hour. South entrance by the Crown Fountain. She was there when I showed up, wearing running gear but clearly not out for a jog. We moved toward the lake, sidestepping early morning runners and people walking dogs. I spent the night going over everything I know about my husband's business dealings, she said without any lead-in. You're right about the irregularities. I've been deliberately blind, assuming they were aggressive yet legal tactics. And now I'm wondering how many federal laws he's broken while I gave him the perfect cover. A wife with prosecutorial credentials and family connections in the justice system. We paused at a bench overlooking Lake Michigan. The morning sun hammered the water into a sheet of gold, beautiful and misleading, just like everything in Garrett's orbit. I want him destroyed, she whispered. Not merely divorced, destroyed. Can you help me with that? Mrs. Whitfield, I've spent 5 years learning how to take people apart inside the law. Corporate raiders, hostile takeover specialists, executives who think they're above the rules. Your husband is just another target. Sloane, and what about your wife? I asked. Brooke made her choice. Now she lives with the consequences. Sloane watched me with a prosecutor's gaze. You're very cold about this. Emotion is the enemy of justice, I answered. Cold gets results. She smiled then, the first smile since we'd met. I think we'll be effective together. Over the next hour we sketched our plan. Sloane would pull her legal networks to prompt inquiries into Garrett's business dealings, file for divorce, and seek asset freezes. I would coordinate with Daniel to record every detail of Garrett's affairs, creating an airtight infidelity case designed to ruin him in court. What about criminal exposure? I asked. Leave that to me, she said. I still have contacts at the U.S. Attorney's Office. If federal crimes are hidden in his operations, they'll find them. As we stood to leave, Sloane gripped my arm. One question. Are you doing this for justice or revenge? She asked. Is there a difference? Sometimes revenge is emotional and personal. Justice is methodical and thorough. Then I guess we're seeking justice, I said. She nodded with approval. Good. Revenge burns hot and fast. Justice burns slow and leaves nothing behind. I spent the afternoon at the firm, ostensibly handling client matters, but actually mining our legal databases for a deeper look at Garrett's empire. What surfaced was worse than I'd imagined. Property deals that made no financial sense, shell companies registered in Delaware with no obvious purpose, real estate sales to buyers that existed only on paper. If I were prosecuting this, I'd call it a textbook money laundering scheme cloaked as luxury real estate. My phone buzzed, a text from Brooke. Can we please talk? This is getting crazy. I ignored it. 20 minutes later, another text. Garrett says you're making threats. That's not like you. Maybe it should have been. At 6 p.m., as I left the office, Garrett Whitfield stepped out of a black Escalade at the curb. He looked like Central Casting's wealthy villain. Silver hair, an expensive suit, That vacation tan from winter trips to Cabo. Two men in cheaper suits flanked him, the bulges under their jackets suggesting they weren't carrying business cards. "Mr. Caldwell, I think it's time we had a face-to-face conversation," he said. "I think you're right," I replied. He gestured toward his SUV. "Shall we go somewhere private?" "Here's fine," I said. "Lots of witnesses, security cameras, very civilized." His smile was all teeth and no warmth. "You've been busy calling my wife, spreading lies about me." "I haven't lied. Everything I shared with Sloan is documented fact. Sloan is my wife. She'll stand by me when this nonsense blows over." "Will she?" I asked, because I got the impression she was more interested in standing over your grave. The muscle moved closer, but Garrett raised a hand. "You're making a mistake, Caldwell. I have connections in this city. I could make your life very difficult." "You already made my life difficult when you decided to sleep with my wife," I said. Brooke came on to me. What was I supposed to do? Show character? Garrett replied, "If you had character, we wouldn't be having this conversation." One of the muscle guys muttered about teaching me respect. Garrett shook his head. "I'm going to give you one chance to walk away from this. Drop whatever vendetta you're pursuing. Take your wife back. Move on with your life. If you don't, you'll discover how much damage a man with resources can do to someone who's overreached." I studied him. This predator had built a life taking what he wanted from people who couldn't fight back. Then I smiled. "Mr. Whitfield, you just made a critical error. You assumed I was someone who couldn't fight back." I turned and walked toward the parking garage, feeling their stares. Let them watch. Let them think they'd intimidated me. Tomorrow they'd learn the difference between intimidation and motivation. Back home, I found 17 missed calls from Brooke and a voicemail of mostly sobs mixed with threats to make things right and promises she'd end it with Garrett if I'd give us another chance. Too late. Way too late. I poured a scotch and called Daniel. "I need everything you can find on Garrett's associates, business partners, employees, anyone who might know about his operations. Looking for witnesses. Looking for leverage. And Daniel, assume we're being watched. Garrett's escalating. Copy that. I'll go full paranoid mode," he said. I hung up and sat in the empty house thinking about justice, revenge, and how thin the line between them could be. Sloan was right. There was a difference. But when the system failed and men like Garrett felt untouchable, maybe revenge was the only justice left. Tomorrow the real work would begin. The first sign our plan was working arrived 3 days later when Garrett was fired from his own company. I was in a deposition for an unrelated matter when text from Brooke lit my phone. "What did you do?" Then, "Garrett's been suspended pending investigation." And finally, "Call me now." I didn't call her. I called Sloan. "My father's friends work quickly," she said, satisfaction plain in her voice. "The SEC opened an investigation yesterday based on anonymous tips about irregular financial activity. Garrett's board voted to suspend him this morning, pending results." Anonymous tips. Former employees with interesting stories about cash transactions and falsified documents. Amazing what people remember when they're given immunity and a safe place to talk. I felt that rush when a plan clicks. "What's next?" I asked. "Divorce papers are being served this afternoon. I'm filing for immediate asset freezes based on evidence of financial malfeasance. Should keep him from moving money offshore. And criminally, the U.S. Attorney's Office is taking an interest. Several property sales match patterns they're probing in other money laundering cases." After the deposition, I drove home through Lincoln Park thinking how fast a life can unravel under the right pressure. Garrett had assumed money and connections made him untouchable. Every empire has weak points. Ours was a precision demolition. Brooke waited in my driveway, pacing like a trapped animal. Eyes red, makeup smeared, hair a mess. "You destroyed him," she said the moment I stepped out. "Are you happy?" "I'm getting there," I replied. "This is insane, Ethan," she said. "Over what, a stupid affair?" "Several affairs," I said. "With multiple women, some barely out of college, and apparently massive financial crimes." I walked past her toward the house. "But sure, let's call it a stupid affair." She followed me up the steps. "You're ruining innocent people's lives like Sloan." Because she seems grateful someone finally told her the truth about her husband. Brooke went white. You told his wife. I showed his wife pictures, documents, financial records. Oh God, oh God, this is really happening. I turned to her on my porch. What did you expect, Brooke? That I'd just accept it? Pretend not to know while you and your boss laughed about the clueless husband? It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. You chose him. You chose lies. You chose to destroy our marriage for a man who used you the same way he used dozens of other women. The only difference this time is consequences. My phone rang. Daniel, we have a problem. Garrett just left the police station with 2 lawyers and he doesn't look happy. My source says they questioned him about the money-laundering allegations but didn't arrest him. Not enough evidence yet? I asked. Not enough evidence yet. But here's the interesting part. One of his lawyers is Vincent Torino. I knew the name. Torino defended organized crime figures, the kind of attorney you hire when federal charges loom. Suggestions? Daniel asked. Watch your back. Men like Garrett don't take humiliation well, and he has nothing left to lose. I hung up and found Brooke staring at me in panic. Who was that? She asked. Work. Ethan, we should leave town for a while together, until this blows over. There is no us, and this isn't blowing over, I said. She grabbed my arm. You don't understand what Garrett is capable of. I understand perfectly. He's a predator shielded by money and connections. Predators are dangerous when hunting weaker prey. You think you're stronger than him. I'm smarter and I have better friends, I said. As if on cue, Sloane's Mercedes pulled into the driveway. She stepped out wearing the expression of prosecutors about to dismantle a defendant on cross. Mrs. Caldwell, she said to Brooke with icy politeness. How nice to finally meet the woman who's been sleeping with my husband. Brooke stepped back. Relax. I'm not here for you. You're irrelevant. Sloane turned to me. We need to talk privately. Brooke watched us, realizing she was suddenly a minor character in a much larger story. Ethan, please go home, she said. Or go to a hotel, or wherever. Just go. She stood, then walked to her car with what dignity she could muster. Sloane watched her leave like an entomologist studying an insect. Pathetic. I almost feel sorry for her. Almost. She knew he was married. She made her choice. Sloane's expression hardened. Speaking of choices, Garrett made one today that's going to cost him everything. We went inside. She showed me a text on her phone. Tell your new boyfriend to back off or he'll regret it. This isn't over. It had been sent an hour earlier, threatening a federal judge's daughter in writing. That's a special kind of stupid, I said, studying the message. What are you thinking? Sloane asked. I'm thinking my husband just gave us probable cause for a restraining order. I'm also thinking men who make threats usually make mistakes. And we need to be careful about the next steps, she added, smiling. For the first time I understood why opposing counsel feared her in federal court. Careful is for people who have something to lose. What do we have to lose, Ethan? I thought about that as she left. What did I have to lose? My marriage was gone. My orderly life lay in ruins. My reputation might survive, but it would be forever marked by this scandal. Sometimes when you lose everything that matters, you gain the freedom to do what's necessary. And what was necessary was finishing what we'd started. Garrett's restraining order violation came at 3:00 a.m. Thursday. A brick through my kitchen window with a note. Drop the investigation or next time it won't be a window. I called the police and then Sloane. She arrived with private security while cops dusted for prints they wouldn't find. He's panicking, Sloane said, holding the note. This gives us more legal ammunition. At 7 a.m. Daniel called, turn on Channel 7 News. Federal agents were raiding Whitfield luxury properties. The cheerin' read, FBI raids luxury real estate firm in money laundering investigation. I felt savage satisfaction watching Garrett's world implode on television, but this was also the most dangerous moment. A cornered man with nothing left to lose. Brooke called in a panic. Garrett's been saying crazy things, blaming you for everything. I'm scared. Stay at your sister's. Call police if he contacts you. By afternoon, Sloan had won emergency asset forfeiture. Judge granted everything: accounts, real estate, cars. Garrett was broke until the criminal case resolved. How did he take it? He wasn't there. His lawyers couldn't reach him. At 6 p.m., as I was leaving my office, the lights went out. Emergency power kicked in, but I heard the elevator open on my floor after hours. "Sloan," I whispered into my phone. "I'm in trouble." Footsteps approached. The door opened. Garrett Whitfield looked like a man who'd lost everything. Disheveled, unshaven, eyes raw with rage. "Hello, Ethan. We need to finish our conversation," he said. He'd paid security to vanish. "I know things about important people," he said, pulling out a tablet. "Every transaction, every payment, every arrangement. Senators, judges, business leaders, everyone who's used my services." He threatened to expose clients unless I backed down. "Your name is in here too," he said. "Your firm handled transactions for my shell companies. You'll be disbarred, probably indicted." My blood ran cold. How many merger contracts had been for Garrett's operations? "You have 1 hour. Call a press conference, recant everything, or I release it all. Half the city burns." After he left, I called Sloan and told her his ultimatum. "We call his bluff," I decided. "What if he's not bluffing?" she asked. "Then we deal with the consequences. I won't be blackmailed." 57 minutes later. "Time's up, Caldwell. What's your decision?" "Go to hell," I replied. He laughed like breaking glass. "You just destroyed half the city." I just refused to be blackmailed. Within minutes, reporters were calling about a massive document dump exposing Chicago corruption. My name was in the files. Daniel monitored the feeds. It's everywhere, every news outlet simultaneously. Then Sloan texted, "FBI arrested him at O'Hare trying to flee to Costa Rica." At home, news vans ringed my house. Sloan waited inside with a glass of wine. "Did they get him?" I asked. "They did. It's over." The criminal case was only the beginning. The fallout from those files had just started. We watched our lives dissected on television. Money laundering, organized crime ties, payments to officials. The full scale of Garrett's operation was exposed. "Any regrets?" Sloan asked. "About Garrett? No. He was a predator who thought money made him untouchable. The collateral damage is regrettable, but Garrett chose to threaten innocent people rather than face consequences alone." Brooke called one last time. "I'm sorry for all of it." "What happens now?" she asked. I looked at Sloan, already plotting her next moves as reporters sought answers outside. "Now we deal with the consequences. All of us. My marriage was over. My career in shambles. My name forever tied to Chicago's biggest corruption scandal. But I'd achieved my aim. I'd brought down a predator who believed himself untouchable. The setup had worked exactly as planned. Garrett Whitfield was destroyed, his empire exposed, his victims freed. Being caught in the blast radius was the price of justice. Cold, practical, absolute. Loot, loot, flute, 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 loot, 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 loot.